there are going to be executives that disagree with me about taking a stand. I don't think you can sit on the sidelines anymore. I think the world demands too much of us, and I think it's also our obligation to take a stand, whether it be supporting a group like Black Lives Matter, or whether it be supporting diversity in the workplace, or rights of women. I'm supportive of all those things, right? As I joke, I'm the I may be one of the few liberals from Alabama, right? And so I don't hide that fact. I don't think caring about others should be a conservative or liberal stance. I think it's a stance about humanity.
And now a word from our sponsor, ETS Solutions.
Hello, this is Jim Beard with ETS Solutions. Thanks for checking out our new podcast series, CIO Insights, where we get a little bit more personal with our guests. We talk about their careers, we talk about their personal interests, and we even ask them to give a little bit of advice to those who are still coming up the ranks. For over 20 years now, ETS has been providing award-winning technology consulting services. Based on our 5 core values of faith, family, community service, client experience, and trust, we're able to offer consulting services to just about every vertical. And our services cover everything from edge computing and cloud services to voice and data to cybersecurity and project management. Whatever your technology needs are, we can help. We invite you to check out the link below or call the number below to find out more about ETS and where we can fit into your technology stack. Enjoy the podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the CIO Insights podcast by ETS Solutions. This podcast was designed to speak to CIOs in a way that's personable, in a way that provides value to you, whether you're new to the technology industry or whether you've been in it for 20 years. And today we have an exciting episode for you. Our guest today does not need any introduction. If you're in the Atlanta technology community or you just keep up with the Atlanta tech community, then you know this guy sitting next to me, Mr. Jason James, also known as JJ. How you doing, sir?
Good. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And I'm glad to have you here. And I know there's so much that we can talk about. I know you do these things often, these type of conversations. And since you do, I kind of want to switch it up and make it a little different.
Sure.
And start by doing something that many people probably may not know about you, but you shared with me that you have been a barbecue judge in 8 different states.
Right. So just to give a little bit more insight, I am what's called a Kansas City Barbecue Society certified judge.
Wow.
And so it's a governing body. They have rules and regulations. I've been fortunate enough to judge in the 8 states and District of Columbia. I've judged the World Series of Barbecue twice, which is American Royal. It came to me through actually coworkers at a time. They were looking for a birthday gift and they said, well, I don't know many more people more opinionated than JJ, nor that likes barbecue. This would be great. So I went to a class and went to a certification program. And so there are rules and regulations. And so it absolutely has nothing to do with what I do on a daily basis. If you think about the difference and the dichotomy between barbecue and technology is all about speed. Barbecue is the exact opposite, right?
Yeah.
And speed will ruin it, right? The idea is how long can you take a little amount of heat to break down collagen, fat, and other materials into something that creates something beautiful. Yeah. And in a way, it's one of the few true American art forms, just like rock and roll and jazz. It was born out of the African American community, and then became one of these really interesting things. And now it's sort of getting worldwide acclaim. If you look at Aaron Franklin out of Austin a few years ago, he was the first pit master to actually win a James Beard Award. So it's gone prime time, so to speak.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. I would have never known it was that big of a culture that they have. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about the history of barbecue, it was the leftover meat that either plantations owners didn't want or ranch owners didn't want. So if you take brisket in Texas, the idea is brisket's more close to leather, right? And you need 12 hours to break it down and to make it something amazing. And what we think about as being Georgia barbecue or the Carolina barbecues or Alabama barbecue was slave trimmings, right? Yeah. And so to take something that was not wanted and to be one of the most popular, hottest food items shows the resiliency of Americans.
Yeah, I love that. That's so cool. Inside of all the states that you've been in, that you tried barbecue in, which is your favorite? Which state has the best?
So I grew up in Alabama. I've lived in Georgia 21 years, but my heart when it comes to barbecue is really in Texas.
Really?
If you look at what they do with brisket, it's phenomenal. But all of them have merit. All of them have worth. It's all different. It's much like any cuisine throughout the world. Every community and culture puts their spin on it. If you go to South Carolina, they're the only state with 4 distinctive sauces. Mustard being the only, a very distinctive South Carolinian thing.
Yeah.
But they all have merit, right? The idea with anything is, do you put in the time and you put in the love for it?
And were you that intentional about it, about getting into the crafts, in terms of, that it's almost the complete opposite in terms of just
No, but it became good therapy, right?
Okay.
Some people take up golf. I don't like golf, first of all. I'm not into any kind of country club kind of sport. And so the idea was, I both competed as well as judged. And it was just something to sort of take your mind off the intensity of technology, right? You have to have hobbies. If you want to be interesting, you have to be interested. And this idea is you need something to be interested in. And since then I've become a father, so I'm devoutly dedicated to my daughters, and that keeps me busy. So I don't get to enjoy it as much as I would like to. With the weather turning great in Atlanta, it'd be great to sit on the back deck, fire up the big green egg, and break open a beer. Maybe this weekend, we don't know.
Hopefully, because it should be a nice weekend. So hopefully get there. So that's cool. And now that we got that part out of the way, we can kind of talk about the technology now. So I know during our first conversation, you talked about the importance of a network and how your network becomes a part of your net worth.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about, and again, I didn't coin the phrase your network being part of your net worth, but it's true. If I think about the last 3 jobs I've had, they've come in through my network. Building that network is important for multiple reasons, not just for your career advancement, but no matter what we do in technology, it's immensely complicated. But many times we'll run into issues. Other people have had those issues. Reach out. The one thing I can say as a CIO in Atlanta is our CIO community is incredibly helpful, right? They're incredibly well connected. I mean, just walking down the hall, they're like, oh, by the way, this person said hi, JD, right? We're all interconnected. And as I become more of a national presence CIO, again, we're headquartered in Pittsburgh. I live here in Atlanta. Our community here is incredibly well connected and very, supportive of one another. And it's great. So, often I'll get approached by, hey, JJ, I've got this role. Well, it's not a fit for me and I'm not looking, but tell you what, I'm going to put you in touch with 4 people. And the reason why that's important, that might be a role that changes their life.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it helps those people looking, right, to fill the need. But at the same time, it might change them. And so it's important as you work your network, it's not about what people can do for you. It's about what you can do for them. It will always reciprocate, right? But the idea first is how you help others, and, if I think about my network and I've called on that network to support, nonprofits and other passions that I have, and they've always stepped up, and I think the great thing that makes the CIO community great, not just here in Atlanta, but, I can think about all the connections I have with CIOs throughout the country, if not the world. And the fact is, our job at the heart of its DNA is about making things better. They're often the same kind of women and men that are trying to make the world better as well.
Yeah. That's really good. And so with this podcast, I've been blessed to be able to talk to different CIOs, and I've been surprised by some of the conversations that I'm having. And one of the topics is networking. And I've heard some CIOs say that they don't know where to place their networking energy, right? Because there's so many different ways they can go about it.
Sure.
So what is your advice for a CIO?
With anything, it's something you've got to be interested in and something you're passionate about. So if you look at TechBridge, I've been supported of that organization for years. Part of what they're doing is not only helping other nonprofits, they're trying to really combat systemic poverty, right? And if you think about it, I was fortunate. I tell people all the time, so I grew up a couple hours south of here in Alabama. I'm the first generation on either side of my family never worked in a cotton mill, right? So growing up, I was on that bottom rung of the middle class ladder.
Yeah.
All it took was missing a check to fall off that ladder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you manage to make it to the top, it's your obligation to send the elevator back down.
Mm-hmm.
And so you find an organization that you're passionate about helping others. You know, I think, you know, if we're CIOs, you know, we've got a responsibility, both men and women, to give back to our community. And I encourage people to start in your community, right? There are plenty of problems around the world. We would love to solve them all. But if we could solve it just in our backyard, and I'll take a very prime example. So I'm part of a group that meets every week. It started way before me, but it's called CIO Chat. And it's a Twitter-based group made up of CIOs throughout America. And I'm a recent addition to the board. Well, one of the things that we did this year, not only did we create a scholarship for a couple of students, I built out a mentorship program. So those 2 students, starting next month, will enroll in a mentorship program for the period of 1 year with me and 3 other CIOs. Probably some of you've had on this podcast already. But the idea is, how do we give back? How do we get them started, right? Because when I started my career early on, it was really hard to get to the CIOs. You know, there were times where I worked at organizations where I might have been second or third in command. If I wanted to speak to the CIO, I still had to go through their assistant. I agreed when that was my turn, I would never be that way. There would always be this open door, whether I was in person or not, to meet with them. And so I wanted to take that same kind of mentorship approach to CIO Chat and say, how do we give back? But to go back and sort of focus on your question a little more, find something you like, find something you're passionate about. You know, I think about my late father, and he was involved with the Lions Club for years, right? And it was important to him because one of the missions they did was try to combat blindness around the world, right? There are plenty of opportunities to network. There's plenty of opportunities to work with nonprofits. It does become hard to focus on. What you have to do is spend some research up front to figure out what aligns with your own values and what aligns with your own passions.
Yeah. I love that. And I like how you got into the service and the giving back, because it's one of the topics that I want to talk to you about. Because not only are you a CIO and a well-known CIO, but you're also a change agent, you know, for culture and almost like an activist, if you will, right? And I admire that because, you know, I plan on being an activist myself, like for Black people. So it's cool to just see you know, out there speaking your message. And when we talked, you spoke about just how you went. You spent 2 months on parental leave for the birth of your daughters, and that's something that hasn't been heard of, right? But you're very passionate about that. So can you talk to me about that?
Well, I think, number one, there are going to be executives that disagree with me about taking a stand. I don't think you can sit on the sidelines anymore. I think the world demands too much of us. And I think it's also our obligation to take a stand, whether it be supporting a group like Black Lives Matter, or whether it be supporting, diversity in the workplace, or, rights of women. You know, I'm supportive of all those things, right? You know, as I joke, I'm I may be one of the few liberals from Alabama, right? And so I don't hide that fact. I don't think caring about others should be a conservative or liberal stance. I think it's a stance about humanity.
Yeah.
And so I was fortunate that I do work for an organization where we do have parental leave. And so when my daughter was born in November, I took 2 months off. And so it wasn't about just supporting my wife. And believe me, that's immensely important because we have a 2-year-old at home and my wife had to have a C-section. And the thing about having a C-section is you're not allowed to lift anything heavier than your own baby for 6 weeks. Now, what that meant was she couldn't pick up my 2-year-old. And in the heart of pandemic, I wasn't going to bring in a third party to help take care of them. Yeah. And so I used that 9 months to plan with not only my executives, but that 9 months to plan with my team to prove succession planning works. If you're a leader, at some point, you have to plan for the day you won't be there. That doesn't make you less of a leader. That makes you a more prepared leader. I also wanted to show the stance that we have to change the stigma. If you look at our parents, our father's generation, they were in the delivery room. But if you went back to our grandfather's generation, hell no, they weren't in the delivery room. They might not have been in the waiting room. Who knows? And so I wanted to break the stigma to say, you can be home with your spouse. You can take care of your children, right? And if a CIO at a fast-paced, growing SaaS organization can do it, you can too. So I want it to be as commonplace in the next decade or more that nobody thinks twice that a man took off time for the birth of their child, right? And it's important because not just for your spouse, but you won't get that connection back with your child again. You won't get that time back, right? And let me tell you, as hard as digital transformation is, raising kids is 10 times harder. And so it was important for me to be there,
For sure.
It's when we think about our ultimate legacy, nobody's going to remember all the digital transformation projects I worked on. They don't care. But my children are going to remember if I was there or not, throughout their life, not just at the first start of it. People are going to remember how you made them feel. They're not going to remember the project. So that's important.
Wow, that's so cool. And I'm glad you talked about the 9-month planning period, because I was going to ask you, that seems almost, it seems like it'll disrupt. It seems disruptive, right?
Well, it was disruptive in a way, right? We were going through multiple acquisitions at the time, but it also, the baby didn't show up tomorrow, right? We knew she was coming. And so it made everybody nervous. Don't get me wrong. All of a sudden, one of your key generals is not going to be on the battlefield for 2 months.
Right.
It caused alarm. Luckily, the rest of my C-suite was supportive, including my CEO. At the same time, I wanted to show that it's not a one-man show. I've got really good lieutenants that report directly into me that can do their job. It also gave them a moment to shine. Right. At the same time, you cannot be the only spotlight. And so what it prepared my second in command for the someday, whenever that may be, that I move on, that he knows at some point he can also step up.
So what are those conversations and this whole preparation phase look like?
Well, so much of it becomes politics. Hey, guess what? I'm going to be gone for 2 months. What? And people are like, well, what are we going to do? Here's what we're going to do, right? Here are the meetings you're going to have to take over. Here are the executive updates you're going to have to do. If you run into this issue, here's who you go to. Luckily, me doing that has now shown we have 2 or 3 fathers right now at NetHealth out on parental leave. I'm not saying I opened the door, but we wanted to show, and we made a big deal about it. CIO did it. You can too. Right. And so my message and my journey is to make sure that's seen outside of our organization. We've been asking CIOs for years to lead digital transformation. It's now their mantle to pick up for a cultural change, right? And I'm encouraging every CIO listening to this podcast, just like you've gone into the office of the CEO and CFO and asked for more funding for projects, I'm saying you should meet with your C-suite and say, it's time we offer paid parental leave. And I get if you're a shop and you're 5 or 10 people, you can't do it. I get that. I'm not targeting my message towards them. I'm targeting to the ones that are mid-size and above. It's time to step up and offer it. We're the only modern country on earth that doesn't offer paid parental leave. Why? To say we can't afford it's bullshit. It's time to step up and say, we're going to do the right thing. Is it going to be disruptive? Yes, but we need to destigmatize the fact that men, or any parent for that matter, can take off time to be there for the birth of their children.
That's powerful. Let's stay on this subject of just disruption, right? So what advice would you give to someone that is earlier in their career, but they are experiencing trauma? They are experiencing just feelings of uncertainty. They feel like they're being maybe judged, right? And it's just all these conflicts that they're having to deal with while trying to grow in their industry, right? So as a CIO, you being at the top of it, what is some advice you give to someone?
Number one, we're all going through it. It doesn't matter what level of your career you're at, you still face it every day. I mean, if you think about the last year, right? The global pandemic was the largest disruptive societal event in the Western Hemisphere since World War II. Not to discount 9/11, but way more impactful than 9/11, right? The fact is the supply chains were disrupted. When 9/11 occurred, I could find toilet paper, right? You know, I could find baby food. The supply chain was heavily disrupted, right? Not to mention our own lives. Like I said, this is the first time I've been in an office since February of last year, right? I haven't been on a plane since February of last year, you know, and so major disruption. Everybody's struggling, right? You don't have to be ashamed that you struggle as part of your humanity, right? You know, men especially shouldn't be afraid of that. You know, if I think about the stigma of mental health, 22 veterans commit suicide every day. Wow. That's unacceptable, right? But as a society, we've sort of stigmatized this idea of, you know, mental health, and to the point that, you know, we've stepped up and, sorry, my phone's ringing. That we've epitomized this idea of a strong male figure. And I'm going to focus from the male perspective because I am a man, right? I can't speak about what everybody else is going through. Yeah. But they don't speak up, and they don't talk to their friends, and they don't talk to their family, and they don't talk to others. And so you have options. You can reach out. There are organizations, but the first thing you should do, reach out to those that you trust and those that you love. Success doesn't erase any of that stuff. You know, the more and more successful I got over the years, it didn't erase family issues. You know, it didn't erase anything that you may run into. So don't think that you may be new in your career and it's just happening to you. It'll never go away. It's how you cope with it, right? We cannot change what happens to us. We can only change how we react to what happens to us.
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. And so we talked about some of the organizations that you're a part of, right? Like we talked about TechBridge, which I love TechBridge also. I was actually an intern for TechBridge before I got on with ETS. Wow. So it was pretty cool. But I know you're also involved with TAG, right? And some others. And so out of all of your volunteer, experience, has there been one story that just blew your mind?
Well, they're all part of my overall story, right? There's been so many great aspects of it. If I think about TechBridge, I was a success coach for them. And so the idea is, how do you mentor somebody for a year? How do you help them get their first job in technology? And then that can change their life. Again, the idea, if you can pull somebody out of poverty, imagine what that does to that family. I know what's done to my family, right? And so that's the encouragement, is how do we help others where it can change their life? And so being part of that, being one of those success coaches was great. I mean, my mentee was a rock star. I'm like, why do you even need a mentor, right? But it was that idea is, you're never too old for a mentor, right? You're never too old to get help and have somebody to guide you and offer advice, And so being through that was amazing, but there's so many great stories. I met so many connections through, TAG, and so many connections through the Pittsburgh Tech Council. And so the idea is, each one of them has been so important in certain ways to open up connections, meet new people. Some of those people have been great friends, right? You start as this professional relationship, and then it blossoms into something else.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So we're going to get into our Fab Five round here. So before we do that, I want to ask you, what is some advice that you would give to someone who is, again, early in their career, and they have goals, but they just need help getting there? They just need some motivation. What's something to say?
Look for someone to mentor you. Number one, you have to ask for it. I don't believe in assigning mentorship, and here's why. You got to have somebody that they have something that you want to learn from, and perhaps model your career after. You don't want to copy their career, And so if I think about organizations, I've been part of bigger organizations. I remember one time, I won't list the name of the organization, but they assigned me a mentor, and it was their CIO at the time, and he was a real jackass. And I thought, what would I mentor my career after this guy? This guy is often terse with people and short. From a technology standpoint, he wasn't very strong. And then at the same time, he treated people in a way that I didn't think, number one, I would ever model, right? And so I guess if I had to learn from anything from that mentorship, was what not to do, right? And I don't suggest that. I suggest you find somebody that you're like, I admire who they are as a person, not just as a professional, and get their advice. Ultimately, the only one in charge of your career development is you. And so you have to put in the time, whether it be trying to find a mentor or learning. You never stop learning. I'm a big fan of ongoing education. I read stuff all the time. I look at classes that have nothing to do with what I do. If you look at the services like Coursera or even Masterclass, right?
Yeah.
There's a ton of stuff you can learn off Masterclass. Look at what Sarah Blakely has done with Spanx. That was a phenomenal masterclass. I'm not marketing a product, so to speak, but I can learn from her on how to market a project, right? And so classes like that become important because it's also important to learn from outside of your own industry, right? If I take the fact is I'm in healthcare tech right now, I didn't come from healthcare, right? When private equity approached me, I said, you got the wrong guy. And they said, why is that? I said, well, healthcare is historically known to not be disruptive, to always be the status quo. And I said, that's not me. Yeah. And they were like, that's exactly why we want to talk with you. And so, bringing perspectives from the outside can not only help your career, it can help your technology. It can, this is why diversity is so important, right? If we're building a team, if we're building a solution, the more ideas we can have from the outside, the better solutions we can get. And the same is true as our career. If I think about how important marketing is by the time you make it to the CIO, if I'd have just modeled my career after that of a technologist, I may have missed that, right? At the end of the day, we're all salespeople, right? What are we selling? We might be selling the brand of ourselves. We might be selling a project. We might be selling an idea. And so look at how really good sales women and men do their job. Yeah. And you can learn from that. We all have something to learn from each other, but if we're not willing to listen, that becomes the problem. I feel far too often people are ready to respond rather than listening. We need to be always actively listening.
Yeah, that's beautiful, beautifully said. And so we're going to get into our Fab Five round. But before we do that, I want to mention that this podcast is sponsored by ETS Solutions. And ETS is a faith-based technology consulting company. We specialize in multi-location implementations. And we guarantee our ETS user experience guarantee, which is to increase revenue, decrease costs, or increase productivity every time. So for more information on ETS Solutions, visit etssolutions.com. And now, Fab Five, you ready?
I'm ready.
If you could have one superpower, what would that be and why?
Oh my God, strength, right? How often do you need that? The whole, just as a 40-year-old dad picking up my toddler, I'm like, oh, she's getting heavy, right? Strength would probably be up there. Invisibility would probably, you can imagine the negotiating powers you would have if you had the ability to be invisible and listen more.
Yeah, I love that. And so the second question will be kind of hard for you because the second one is, what is something that is not on your LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter?
Oh, man.
You post a lot. So
I don't post anything about my children, right? My Facebook is reserved for that. It's heavily locked down. I don't share anything about my family on there. I do share, projects I'm working on, things I'm passionate about, trends in technology, but I heavily segment what is professional versus what is personal.
Gotcha. Okay. And then third question, if you can have dinner with three people, dead or alive, who would they be and why?
Okay, let's start with dead. Benjamin Franklin.
Okay.
I often think about Dr. Franklin and how impactful he was to not only the founding of this country, but technology as a whole. If you think about a lightning rod, that was developed by Dr. Franklin and given away to the world, right? And so I feel like he would totally be one of the founding fathers that would be on social media with me. I would totally follow him. He might not follow me back, but he's really cool. You've got to understand that he was the ultimate politician. And so when he was spending time in France gathering support for the revolution, he did that at the dinner table. He did that in the salons of influential women at the time. Yeah. And so I've often thought, man, it'd be great to have dinner with him and talk about how much the world's become. I would, living, You may not always agree with what Elon Musk is doing, but man, he's fascinating. I mean, every project he touches has the ability to change the world, whether it be Hyperloop or whether it be SpaceX. And it's like, he doesn't want to, like, people often avoid hard problems. He's like, give me every problem you have that's hard and I want to solve it. And the last one would be, if you could have dinner with one more person, living or dead, probably my father.
Yeah, wow, that would be beautiful, beautiful dinner.
Yeah.
Awesome. Then last question, what is one thing that you wish you would have known at the beginning of your career?
Oh man, invest early on.
What do you mean by invest?
And it's two parts. Number one, invest in yourself, as quickly as possible. And, I feel like I've constantly done that, but more, right? Invest in yourself, whether it be building your network or learning more or being more connected to people. Any investment you ever make in yourself always pays dividends, always. The second is financially. The earlier you can put back because of compounding interest and growth, the better you can be. I've been extremely fortunate with stock picks for the last 20 years, right? But if I'd have done that 30 years ago, we might not have had this talk, right? If I'd have been on Bitcoin $1,000 early on, then, there wouldn't be a talk. But you can't put back enough. And the reason why, you never know what you might be hit with, whether it be a medical bill or a house emergency or family emergency. So the earlier you can invest, the better it is, right? Yeah. If you think about people that are able to retire, it's ridiculous, right? So invest in yourself, invest in your future.
Yeah. Awesome. There it is. Well, JJ, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm glad you came. And so thank you for joining CIO Insights Podcast by ETS Solutions. See you all on the next episode.